Hello, welcome back to the workshop. Brilliant to have you here because today is part 2 of me making my very first ever sword. I'm so excited. And today we're going to be continuing on with the Damascus steel. Thanks for watching. I think inexperience with making a particular project tends to take me to one end of the extreme. Either I take way too little material for the project and I'm struggling to get what I need out of said piece of steel, or I take way too much material for the project. And I think on this project it's definitely been the latter. Here is the piece of steel from which I'm going to be making the sword. But there's a lot of work to do left. So right now the pattern is running down the length of the bar. The interesting pattern is on the end grain. Now that's a little problematic because I can't just hammer out a sword from this piece of flat stock. What I need to do is I need to get this repeating up a flat stock on the end grain. Really difficult, and in yesterday's video I talked about a ferry flip. It involves taking a saw, a bandsaw, and cutting like this. You cut at an angle, which means that now, with that little piece, if I turn it 90 degrees, the end grain is facing upright, and when you cut many of these pieces, and you stack them up, like this, you then have a weld surface that's continually getting longer as you hammer, and it means that you can hammer straight down while still putting force on the welding area. Now, of course, this process has its major risks. Because, okay, though we kind of get to hammer on the weld is wanting to pull itself apart as you hammer it because it's lengthening along the weld line, which means that the surfaces need to be as clean as possible and they need to line up and stack up perfectly. Ideally, I would angle grind this and then surface grind this with a surface grinder. That would be the best thing. Instead, what I'm gonna do, because I'm using the resources I have available, is I'm going to use this mill in my mill, take it easy, and mill all 4 surfaces, get a consistent bar, and then I'm gonna be able to go into the bandsaw and cut everything up. Since I have absolutely no need for all of this amount of steel, I'm gonna cut off a few chunks here that I can use for the guard and for the pommel, etc., using the same piece of pattern, and then I'm gonna cut off a length, you know, maybe about this long or so here in the middle, that I will then put into the mill and start milling on. Before I do any more, I'm gonna run to my steel supplier, who obviously also sells my oxygen. They also sell my welding gases. I've run out of my CO2 argon mix, I'm gonna get another one. So here is the piece from the mill. So it's nice, it's got the level of cleanliness that I want. Now what I need to do is I need to start cutting it for the ferry flip or the tiling or whatever you want to call it. This is how it works. And at this stage, the pattern that was running down the piece will run upright. Now, of course, I have to then weld counting on this line here. This is the welding line. Loads of issues with that. We have 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and they're all cut up. Now, if still the pattern is running this way along all the pieces, a really big mistake now would be to forget to flip the pieces and make the end grain be on top. So now what I need to do is I need to do precisely that. I need to make sure that the end grain is on top, but I'm still a little nervous about how this goes because I want to make sure the end grain's on top, but also ideally I would have this little bit of end grain match up with this side of the pattern too, so that the pattern is stacking on top of itself nicely on the blade. I want to make sure that when let's see if I can work this out as we go, when I turn this up on end, you see what I'm doing is I'm putting this bottom part of the pattern to the top. Shoot, I've lost it already. Okay, I gotta do some thinking. Okay, after pontificating for a long time, I can now explain it. So what I did is, as I turned one clockwise to get there, then the next anti-clockwise, next clockwise, next anti-clockwise, so on and so forth, all the way down, which means that now I have the pattern nicely, I guess the term would be book matching up to itself along the length of it. So now what I want to try and do, so that I absolutely do not lose what awesomeness this is, and I don't lose this stack and how it's all orientated, is I'm gonna take my Sharpie. So it's all stacked up and it's ready to be put together. It's on a steel plate and it's all flat and even. All the surfaces are as clean as I can possibly get them. But this right here, I'm not sure, this is probably up there with the most nerve-inducing parts of the creation process of this sword. I've got the MOSAIC, I've got 11 beautiful little stacks, and it's gonna replicate beautifully up along the sword, provided this works. And right now, I am terrified because as I start this, there then ends up being really no going back. There's nothing I can improve to make it weld better. There's nothing I can do to increase my odds other than do what I always do, which is put it in the forge, heat it up to welding temperature, and hammer it together. There's no magic. This is it. Once I weld this is where I could potentially really screw up this project. So this is tense as I try and work out and try and sum up the courage to move from step to step. So it's all set up, it's all clamped, none of this is gonna move. I'm now going to weld it. So indeed we are fast approaching the moment of truth. I have it all ready to go. It's ready to go in the fire. This is where it either goes great or it goes terribly wrong. So the hope here is I heat it up, forge weld it, draw it out, not too much more. I'm not gonna take it to a blade ship right now. The first thing I'm gonna do is weld it, consolidate it, draw it out a little bit, and then I'm gonna let that cool down overnight so that tomorrow I can then grind out all the spots that have been hit with a MIG welder. I'm gonna put this piece in the fire and I'm gonna have as much fun as I can, no matter what. To some, this may seem like today all I've achieved is taking a little bit of steel off some steel, cut it up, put it put it in a stack, and then hammered it together. And in short, that's what it is, but I don't think that explaining it that way really quite grasps the enormity of this for me. For me, this is a very enormous task, because I have to really take a lot of care going through this to make sure that the fit up of all these little pieces is good, make sure that it's going to turn out great. You know, I want to make sure this sword has a very good structure to it, you know, make sure that it's strong, make sure that it's not going to break and fall in half. These are things that are so important, and while I'm prepping for the welds, this is all in my mind, and I have to make sure that everything is right. I have to really respect the process, and that's why there's so much thinking going into every step. There's so much time being spent, because that's got to be right. This is exciting. It's very daunting to be undertaking this project, as I keep saying, but it's exciting to really, you know, be trying to respect the craft at every step, trying to do this sword justice, trying to learn as much as I can from the process, and of course, it's all the better for having had you here on this episode. I'm very much looking forward to tomorrow, because in tomorrow's episode, I'm going to be grinding out the MIG welds and the filler metal from the MIG weld, and that's also going to be seeing if there are any issues with the weld and whether I need to address that. From there, I'm going to be forging out the blade of the sword, as well as forging out the crossguard and forging out the pommel. So it's going to be great to be back in the fire again tomorrow, working under the power hammer, working with the hand hammer. I cannot wait to see you then. Be sure to subscribe if you're new to the channel, and if you're watching in the future, there's going to be a whole slew of part 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of this sword making process for you to watch. Aside from that, I really hope you have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.